Hey, so welcome back to my channel. I am Jason, and this is from Sin's Perspective Reviews. So another show that I quite enjoy is called Frankie Drake's Mysteries, and it follows two female detectives during the 1920s. Frankie Drake has a private investigator business in Toronto, and her partner is Trudy. And so you can imagine being the 1920s, being private detectives, you can kind of guess some of the challenges they face. And when you also factor in that Frankie Drake is Caucasian and Trudy is black, there and also lies some issues. So if you're interested in hearing what I have to say for episode 1, stay tuned. Okay, so episode 1, Frankie Drake Mysteries, season 1, episode 1, Mother of Pearls. So it opens at this 5-star hotel called the Crown Ascot. And so you have this guy, he's walking to this room and he's taking these drinks, and then we're now introduced to the Amories, Ned and Nora. And so Nora is going on because she doesn't really want to go to the dinner or party that they're expected to attend later on that evening. She finds it very boring and tiresome, and she would rather just be out on the town doing other things. Her husband, Ned, owns a steel company, I believe, called Amory Steel. And he's telling her that, you know, this city is growing Toronto, and, you know, he's trying to network and make connections so that obviously their business can flourish. And so they get up to start getting themselves together for the night. And I guess he was going to pull the pearls out so that she could wear them to the event. But when he went to his safe, the pearls were gone. And so now we're like, okay, who did it? It's a who done it situation. Obviously, mysteries. So we go to Frankie Drake's office, and Mary arrives. She's banging on the door, and she clearly has an urgent message for Frankie. Flo answers the door, and Flo is a friend of Frankie and Trudy's, and she's also the medical examiner. So Mary arrives, and, you know, of course, they tell her that Frankie isn't there. And of course, it clearly looks like they have something else going on. They're trying to set up this thing. They've been hired by this woman to kind of catch her husband fooling around. And the woman that he's attracted to is Flo. And, you know, Mary, as you can see, she's the one that's sitting down in the photo behind me with the shirt. She's quite prim and proper. I think she's a part of the police, but not really. She's like the morality police, like moral crimes and things of that nature. I think that's what they handle, the women anyway. And so she is very like, oh my goodness, like why are you doing this, and you're doing this in your office, and, you know, quite worrisome. And, you know, they're basically telling her that you know, that it's just, you know, business has been slow, and, you know, this is gonna be a paycheck, so we need to get, you know, strike while the iron is hot. And she eventually find out where Frankie was, and she left to go talk to Frankie. So Frankie is getting some type of, it's called cupping. It's some type of therapy where they put, I guess they heat the glass or something, and they put it on your back, and it creates like this suction. She's trying to kick smoking, and this is said to help with that. So Mary walks in, and she sees Frankie. She's on the table, obviously shirtless. And of course, she's like, oh my God, what are you doing? And she's explaining to her the whole trying to quit smoking, and this is supposed to help. And then she tells her that she really needs to talk to her. So she has to, you know, interrupt her session to find out what's going on with Mary. And Mary ends up telling her that there was a jewel heist earlier, the Amories, and initially Frankie thinks that, oh, you know, so they want to hire me, like, good looking out. And she's like, well, actually, no. Then she pulls out a black feather, and she's like, and Frankie's like, what am I supposed to know what this means? And Mary has to tell her that this was the calling card of the Drake gang. Now, the Drake gang comprised of Ned Drake, Frankie's father, Jack, and I believe it was Morris. And that was their calling card. And seeing the black feather, it kind of took, when they went back into their files, they came across this jewel heist that happened 20 years earlier that was never solved. And because they know that Frankie is Ned's daughter, they are looking at her as a potential suspect. And so she's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know nothing about this feather girl. But because her family, family ties, Mary is basically letting her know that they are, loosely kind of looking at you as a potential suspect. So back at the office, Frankie and Trudy, they're talking, and, they're talking about, the suspicions. And of course, Frankie is not, naive. She knows that her father was involved in criminal activity, but the details of, things, it's not something that she would have been, aware of. So eventually, Trudy decides that she's going to kind of talk to a couple of people that she knows to kind of find out if, there's some new jewelry on the market that somebody's trying to move. And Frankie is going to go to one of her sources, which is Jack. Now, remember I said Jack was part of the Drake gang, and so because he stayed, they stayed in contact. At least he stayed in contact with Frankie. And so, they talked. He came to the office and they talked, and he did say that, the officers not being able to figure out what happened, it drove them crazy, and he kind of got a kick out of it, and they never, it was never solved. But he did tell her that the feather, that was not a detail ever released. So she's thinking that it has to be somebody in the gang who could have, the only person that could have pulled it off, because that little leaving the feather as a calling card wasn't something that was well known. And so he takes her to see Alderman Morris Flynn, who was the other guy in the gang. And initially he's like, well, who is this woman? And then once Jack said, oh, this is Frankie Drake, then he realized that it was Ned's daughter, and he apologized. And, they talked for a while. And, they started talking about, that's how, he was able to get into politics because of the money that his share of the loot, it was allowed, it was used and allowed him to get into politics and to be a wealthy man, obviously. Jack, I think, said he opened a printing press, and Ned, his share went to taking care of Frankie. And they're basically saying that they didn't have anything to do with that. They don't know why, the feather was left behind, and it's basically, it wasn't them. So Frankie, they did mention another guy named Vinny, but they said he had died like a year before in some accident. But they basically said there's nobody else, it was just us, and we didn't do it, right? Frankie is not completely convinced, but at the same time, she really doesn't have a whole lot to go on. But she did tell them that they should probably help her find out, because if the police is coming knocking on her door, it won't be long before the police come knocking on theirs. So she's back at the office, and they're, her and Trudy are updating each other. Basically, Trudy is saying that, it's known that the heist happened, but, right now, anybody who would be in that business knows that the pearls will be way too hot for them to kind of fence right now. And so they're kind of staying away. She talked, about her conversation with Jack and Morris. And of course, she don't really believe them. And then she started talking about, and then she remembered, the couple. And so they decided that Trudy would pose, she would go and talk to the staff, because usually staffs, when you have homes and, hotels like that, staff, they like to gossip. And so she would deal with things on that end. And Frankie decides she's going to pose as an insurance agent for the company because the necklace was insured. And so, you see Trudy, she's talking to one of the housekeepers, and she's asking if there was any, anything unusual going on around the Amory's room or the whole thing. She was like, no, the only thing that came, there was two separate deliveries of flowers. And as Trudy was wrapping up talking to her, a man got off the elevator with a wardrobe going to the Amory's room. And so, Trudy kind of followed him, knocked on the door, and pretended like she was delivering the wardrobe. Crosby opened the door. Crosby is the guy who delivered the drinks earlier. The maître d', I don't know what he would be considered, but he delivered the drinks. And then they started gossiping. He basically talked about how he doesn't like her, Nora, and if she would stop throwing her dresses on the floor, then they wouldn't have to go out so much to be dry cleaned, and how she didn't come from money, and how she's a gold digger, and they, continued on with their conversation. So while that's going on, Frankie is in the room and she's talking to Abe, and Abe is basically saying that he was, his wife was out shopping, and he was getting ready, I think, for a business meeting or something to that effect. And then eventually, later on that evening, they were preparing to go to this dinner. And that's when they found out the pearls were missing. And so she noticed the flowers. And, she asked, about the flowers. And he did mention that, I believe he mentioned that they were a window cleaner. A guy came, window. Then there was a guy out, the window cleaner, and the name, I believe, of the company, of the window cleaning company, was the Gamma Windows Cleaning. And so around this time, Nora walks in. She couldn't see because she was out shopping, and then she noticed Nora, who was posing as Mrs. Cooper. And off the bat, she knew something was up. She was like, well, she said, you must have wings, because I know a train doesn't come directly here, so you would have had to, would have had to fly. And so Mrs. Cooper, aka Frankie, was like, well, you're correct. I'm from our New York office. So Nora asked Abe if he can go and get her a drink. And as soon as he left, Nora basically told Miss Cooper that basically, I don't know who you are, but I know that those men at that insurance company would never let a woman handle a $100,000 claim. So you can go back to whatever rag you came from. Initially, she thought she was a reporter. And she basically kicked her out. You're like, I don't know who you are, but I know you're not who you're claiming to be, and you need to go. So you can see Frankie leaving the hotel. She's pissed, right? So they're back at the office, and, you see Frankie, she's sitting at her desk thinking. And a reporter walks in, Ernest Hemingway. And he started, they traded quips a little bit, and he was asking her about, his previous article, like what she thought of it. And she's like, well, why do you care what I think? You don't strike me as somebody that cares what anybody thinks of your writing. And then he said, started talking about how he, was doing this investigative story, and, it's all involving some gold, stolen pearls, and an investigator with a dubious past, referring to Frankie. And, he wanted to know if she, wanted to add something or, help him out with the article. And initially she said no. And he basically told her that the article is going to be written, but I would prefer, you should want it to be written by a friend and somebody you trust than a stranger. And with that, he left. And of course that left her feeling some kind of way. But I mean, I think the reality is that it's a big story, once you connect all the dots. And so she realized that eventually this story is going to come out. So, he's basically saying you should probably jump in front of it before somebody else takes it, and you have no control over it. So, Trudy's now back at the office, and she's looking through the pages, and she's like, there is no business listing for the Gamma window cleanings. And Frankie was like, I figured it wouldn't be, because back when, when she was a kid, her father would read her stories, and he would allow her to pick out his fake name, his name. And one of the names was the Gamma. And so I think that was the tip off. Like, she realized, okay, there's something else going on here. I don't know why I'm just feeling so uncomfortable, right? And Trudy also told her that Nora, who is passing herself off as a preacher's daughter, I forget what town and church, but Trudy did some research, and basically there is a preacher by that name at the church, but he does not have a daughter named Nora. So Nora went back to the Escott Hotel to ask some more questions. And she basically told her that Basically, she told her to keep her voice down because I guess Abe was there. And, they talked a little bit. And that's when she realized that, well, she was asking her questions. I think Nora was like, well, who are you? Well, who do you think you are? Something to that effect. And she told her that I'm a private investigator. My name is Frankie Drake. And you can see her facial expression changed. And then she turned to her and she revealed that her former name was Nora Drake, and that she's actually Frankie's mother. So all these years she's been told that her mother died. Since she was 4 years old, she was told her mother died. And now this woman is standing in front of her telling her that, no, I'm your mother. So of course she didn't really believe her until she started talking about the names, and she was telling her how her name was spelled. And of course, Frankie was like, well, how did you know that? And she was like, I told your father not to, to do that. And, when he was going to file the paperwork, I wanted him to name you Cleopatra, but he chose not to. And then she realized her dad told her once that, that you almost had a horrible name, Cleopatra, or something to that effect. So that was something only somebody that knew her father and knew her would know. And so, of course, they started going back and forth. And she's asking her, like, why she's there. And she was asking her, like, where she's been. And she's like, Pittsburgh and Chicago. She's been in a number of places. And she said the only reason she's there now is because Abe dragged her there to, I guess, attend this event and to network and do whatever he needed to do. So, of course, she was like, oh, so you didn't come to see me. You came to do something else. And she was like, I mean, basically, the thing about Nora is that she's blunt. She's basically like, yeah, I didn't come to see you. I didn't even know you were here. So back at the office, Frankie is talking to Trudy. And eventually Mary arrived. And she arrived with some research. So I guess Frankie had her do some research on New York, Chicago, and Pittsburgh, which is where Nora said she was. And Trudy was able to find there were some heists that were committed in all of these cities around the same time that Nora was there. And she, at this point, Frankie thinks that either the Amorys, that it has to be an inside job, or no, I think Mary was saying that the police still think that it was Frankie that did it, but that it was an inside job, she had to have help, and they're thinking that maybe the Amorys are now involved in the theft. So, you flash back to the Ascot Hotel. Nora is about to make a run for it. She done got her a cab or whatever. She's trying to get to the Union Station. Frankie arrives just in time. She jumps in the car with her, in the carriage, whatever car with her. And eventually they start talking. And she explains to her that the cops are looking at her, and she's like, well, why would they be looking at you? And because of the family connection and the whole thing. So eventually, she decides to stay to help out. And initially, Frankie doesn't want her to help. She doesn't want basically anything to do with her. So, she's back at the office. Ernest arrived, and he basically apologized for, his approach. Wasn't very friendly, or he apologized for being insensitive. And he was saying, like, during his research, he found a photo, and he gave the photo to her. And it was a photo of, he was like, I know the man and the little girl, but I don't recognize the woman. And it was a photo of Ned, Frankie, and Nora. And that's the only, because at this point, I guess she's never had a photo of her mother, so she didn't even know what her mother looked like. I'm assuming because when she first laid eyes on Nora, she would have recognized her off the back. But now she has this photo of her parents and her when she was a little girl. And they talked, and she agreed to help him with the article, but only if she got to vet the article before it went to press. And he agreed to those terms. Frankie and Trudy, they're now talking, and Frankie is trying to decide whether or not she's going to, she's still feeling some kind of way about her mother being there. And Trudy was basically like, maybe you should take her up on her offer to help. At this point, what could it hurt? And so, she did. And the next thing you know, they're at this bar or tavern, and Jack and Morse arrived. And eventually Nora revealed herself. And they weren't at all surprised to see her. And she said, you know, based on your reaction, I can see that you guys knew that she was alive the whole time. So not only did her father lie to her, Ned has lied to her. I mean, I'm not really going to blame Morris because she don't really know him. But she clearly had a close relationship with Jack, and she felt some kind of way that he's been lying to her all this time. And he did Jack ended up calling her a traitor. Morris ended up calling her, you know, being upset that she left Ned and she abandoned Frankie, and she was basically telling them that they in no position to be on their high horse about any such thing. And no, she's not going. And so she's basically asking them like, okay, so where's my pearls? and they're saying, no, we don't have anything to do with this. And she's not believing them. And then she goes over like, well, okay, so Jack was like, okay, I'll buy it. If we got the pearls, and how do you think we did it? And so she went down how, you know, you would do it the same way I would do it. And then remember when the maid was talking to Trudy about there were 2 deliveries of flowers? She was saying the first delivery, and this is playing out, the first delivery allowed Morris to get gain entry to the apartment because he took the flowers in. And while they were distracted, he unlocked the window and left. So the window washer with the Gamma window cleaning uniform on was Jack. And once he unlocked the window, that allowed Jack to go in to break the safe to get the necklace. And then there was like, oh, wait a minute. The report said that the window was still locked. So if they do that, then how would it be locked from the inside? And then she said, okay, that second delivery, because they said it was 2 delivery of flowers. That second delivery of flowers allowed him to go back into the apartment to lock the window. And so they kind of laughed a little bit, and basically, they're like, it ain't us, we ain't do it, I don't know what you're talking about. So, Frankie and Nora, they're walking and talking, and, you know, Nora had to admit that she didn't believe that they had anything to do with it. And, you know, of course, Frankie asked her why she left, and she said Ned, basically made her choose, because after that, the big heist with the gold, that was it for him. But she was still wanting to live on the wild side. She wanted to live and be free, and he made her choose, and she chose to leave. But Nora did say that, you know what, if they used our tactics to steal the necklace, and then most likely they're going to use our tactics to fence it as well. And so she said we need to get some newspapers. And so they're at the office looking at the newspapers, and she's basically explaining how they usually do this. So the thief will post an article, post a lost and found article. And so the thief would post the fence will post, the person trying to sell the necklace will post a lost article, and the thief would post a found article. And then they would in some way decide on a name and place to meet, a time and place to meet. And so they found an ad talking about a lost clamshell handbag at the Ascot. And they saw that was posted more than once. And so that stuck out to Nora, and she was like, well, that's it. And so the meetup place was 200 Winchester, in which they found was a cemetery. So as they pulled up, they're talking, and then they realized that Morris is there. So Nora runs Morris down, and she's basically like, why are you here? And where's my necklace? And what are you doing? He's like, I don't have it. You know, I saw the article, because obviously if she picked up on that, then they would have too. And he's saying, I don't have it. And so when they deciphered the article, they realized that it was her father's grave, Frankie Drake's father's grave. And so when they got there, they found this box that had one of the pearls from the necklace. So they realized, okay, the person does actually have the necklace. And they talked a little bit, and Nora asked about how Ned died, and there was a fight between 2 boys that he knew, and he intervened, and he ended up getting hit in the head, and he died from his injuries. And you can almost kind of see Nora feeling bad. She did say that he was the only man that she ever loved, and Frankie was like, okay, it was an end, but you still left. So that was confusing to her, which, it would be to me too. So now they're back at the office, and Jack and Norris is there, and they're having him having him call to place another ad, a lost and found ad. So Jack is supposed to pose as the buyer. Norris, obviously, they already know him. So, or, they will once they read the article. So he's in the lobby. Trudy is posing as Jack's nurse. He's in a wheelchair. And so while they're sitting waiting for the time for the person to arrive, eventually Frankie and Nora are talking, and they see Abe, and they're like, oh my God, if we see him, it's going to blow the whole thing. And so Nora got up and she walked over and she started talking to Abe, and she walked him over to get a drink. And no sooner than he left, Ernest sat down, and he's, talking to her about, okay, so I've been watching you, and I know that there's something going on. And she, obviously that's not the time or place to talk. And, they talked a little bit, and eventually he left her to deal with what they were trying to do. So they sat and sat and sat. And they realized the guy, he never showed. So eventually Trudy and Frankie went over to Jack and Norris, and was like, where's this guy? I guess he's not going to show. Maybe something tipped him off. Maybe seeing Abe tipped him off. And that struck something in Frankie. And so she got up and she stormed out. And so she went up to the Anne-Marie's room. And Frankie basically said that he was going to call the cops. And she said, well, you should, I think you should call the cops. I'm actually a private investigator. And she said, I want to know why you're trying to sell your own necklace. He's like, what are you talking about? And she said that you were trying to commit insurance fraud. You were trying to get paid twice. So he filed an insurance claim. The necklace was never stolen, but so he would be able to keep the necklace, file the insurance claim, get the $100,000 payout, and still have the necklace to sell for more money. And then she asked him, well, why would you do that? And he was saying, his wife, she spends a lot. And I guess he figured, like, if he wasn't able to keep up with her demands, that she would leave. And Frankie ended up telling him that she was going to leave you regardless. He's like, what are you talking about? She told him she's a grifter. She's a con artist. And he got upset and was like, well, how do you know that? What makes you say that? And she told her that she's my mother. Her name is actually Nora Drake. So he is obviously upset and in shock. And so he went to the safe to get the necklace. The necklace was gone. And then she realized, okay, well, where's Nora? Because she got up to walk away with him. She was like, oh, she's having a bath. Frankie goes to the bathroom. Nora is nowhere to be found. And she runs outside just to see this car pull off. And she thought that Nora was in there. Nora didn't. She decided she could have, but she decided to stay. And she ends up giving Frankie the necklace. And she was like, well, it's something in me that made me stay. It's an uncomfortable feeling. Like, she didn't want to let her daughter down. That's basically what she was trying to say without saying it. And she's like, this feeling is kind of foreign to me. It made her feel strange. It was kind of funny the way she talked about it. But she ends up giving her the necklace back. So the following day, Frankie arrives at the hotel because the agreement was that she would help Frankie. Frankie would allow her to help her if once everything is all settled, she would leave. And so they talked about Abe. So she said, her and Abe parted ways. And, Frankie told her that she had given him the necklace. Of course, Nora was like, I can't believe you gave him the necklace. She was like, it's his necklace. Like, I can't keep it. She was like, oh, no wonder he took being dumped so well. And so at this point, Nora has decided to stay. Frankie is not happy. She was like, you told me that you were leave. That was the agreement. And she basically asked her for a ginger ale. So they both sat down and have a ginger ale. And I think she said something about their drink being flat. And they both pulled out a flask with whatever in it and mixing the ginger ale. So they were looking at each other like, oh, Lord, they have that in common, right? So back at the office, Trudy and Mary, they're actually reading the edited version of the article. So Ernest wrote the article, but of course, Frankie proofed it. And they were kind of shocked. Mary was like, I can't believe, that all of this stuff happened. And so Trudy was like, well, I would have loved to have seen that necklace. Now, remember when I told you they found a box with a pearl in it at the grave? Frankie had, kept that, and she put the box up in her office. So she was like, okay, well, let me show you. So she went to get the box with the pearl in it. And when she opened the box, it was a black feather in there. Her mother had already been in there and stole the pearl. And so that's how this episode ends. So it's gonna be that kind of show. I really enjoyed the show. And yeah, if you get a chance, I say check it out. So I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys later.